So January 2nd, 2024 is a suggested date by the Justice Department to move ahead with this election interference case. There's also a date set January 15th, 2024, which is another defamation case from E. Jean Carroll. There's also a March 25th, 2024 date for the Manhattan DA's criminal case in that whole hush money scheme to go to trial. And then the classified documents case is set to go to trial in May of 2024. And then, of course, you have the whole running for president business scattered among
January 15th is the Iowa caucus. Yeah, that's a busy dance card. Evan, what do we know about how realistic this March proposal is for Fani Willis?
It seems a little far-fetched, I mean, to be honest, because, there's going to be, between now and then, there's so much that has to happen. First of all, they have to try to figure out whether they're going to keep all of these people together, these 19 defendants together, right? And there's also the question of whether they're going to try to, move some of this out of the state court. So there's so much that a judge will have to sort of referee all of this. Not to mention the fact that you have those federal trials, which take precedence over the state cases.
And Evan, while I have you, what do we know about the negotiations going on behind the scenes right now between Trump's team and Fulton County over his surrender?
Well, they're going back and forth, and it appears, sources are telling Elena Train that they are looking at perhaps next week for him to do this. He has until the 25th, and of course, he has a date that he could be showing up for a Republican debate, which we don't know whether he's going to do or not. So there's so much that he needs to do, and of course, they need to negotiate this with the security people at the Secret Service, because they want to make sure that if the sheriff goes through with what they're saying they're going to do, which is to treat him like anybody else, he's going to get fingerprinted, he's going to get mugshotted, and presents perhaps some new opportunities for the former president to raise some more money.
Yeah. Ellie, another defendant in this case out of Georgia is former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. He's filed to have his case moved from Georgia court to federal court. Why?
Well, Jake, this is more than just procedural wrangling. This could be outcome determinative, because if Mark Meadows can show that the charges relate to his performance of his official duties, in this case as White House Chief of Staff, then a couple things happen. First, he gets moved across the street to the federal courthouse. Second of all, he's then on the doorstep of a dismissal, because under the law, federal law, if a person can show that they've been criminally charged for something that they did, quote, under color of law, meaning in their capacity as a federal official, then the case gets thrown out altogether. So there's no question Mark Meadows has a reasonable argument to make here. And I look for Donald Trump to make a similar argument. I don't think he has as strong an argument. And I look for Jeffrey Clark, who worked at DOJ, to make a similar argument. All of these are going to be potentially dispositive motions.
What does that mean, dispositive motion?
Dispositive means they either stay or they go away. They live or they die.
Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump are also expected to make the same request. Do they have a strong case, do you think?
Donald Trump does not have as good a case as Mark Meadows, because Trump will say, well, this is my effort to sort of regulate and make sure the election was clean as president. But I think the prosecutors are going to respond, no, this was you as a private citizen, as a candidate, way overstepping your authority as president. As for Rudy Giuliani, he's got nothing. He was not a federal employee at the time. He's going to have to argue I was somehow hired by Donald Trump, but that had nothing to do with Donald Trump's official job as president.
So, Sarah Murray, this arraignment is different than what we've seen play out in Miami, in Washington, D.C., and in New York, right? Because it's not going to happen the same day as when he surrenders?
Yeah, we got sort of used to this sort of one and done thing. You go in, you get processed, you make your first appearance in court, you knock the whole thing out in one fell swoop. That's not what's going to happen in this case. Obviously they have until next Friday, these defendants, to turn themselves in. And then she's proposing this date from September 5th for an arraignment. We'll see when that actually is. One of the questions that attorneys watching this case have is, are they going to try to arraign all of them together? Are they going to try to bring all of these 19 defendants together in a courtroom to do this arraignment at the same time? Other people have questioned whether everyone's actually even going to have to be there in person. This court has done a lot of appearances virtually, particularly since COVID, and so it's possible that the judge could allow for something like that as well. So we kind of need to wait and see. for the judge to weigh in.
There's also the stadium next door where Beyonce was a couple nights ago.
Well, right. So maybe we could just do it in the stadium to
Yeah,
put it in
coordinate it with Bay, if possible. Sarah Murray, Evan Perez, Ellie Honig, thanks to you. How could all this be playing out inside Trump world? Well, let's bring in CNN's anchor of The Source, Caitlin Collins, as well as CNN political commentator Alyssa Farah Griffin, the former White House communications director for the Trump administration. Caitlin, another proposed trial date is now filling up Trump's calendar right in the thick of the GOP primaries in March. In fact, the date Fani Willis has proposed is the day before Super Tuesday. How do you think this is going over for the former president and his team right now?
Not great, but I do think that they feel that they have confidence they are going to fight this. It is almost guaranteed that they will fight to push this date back, Jake, if this is something that a judge would agree to. Of course, that is the question of what that ultimately looks like, but they're already preparing to fight against that date that has been set that has been proposed, I should say, by Jack Smith's team in the January 6th case there. And so certainly they are going to also likewise push back against this one. But the reality that they do have is, Trump is going on Truth Social and saying that none of these trials should happen before the 2024 election. I think it's pretty obvious why he thinks that, Jake. But the question and the reality that is facing his legal team is that the judges have so much leeway here. And what I am told is the one that they are most concerned that could happen while this campaign is ongoing in 2024 as he is running for president is the federal indictment from Jack Smith when it comes to the election subversion case. They were actually worried that the judge there, based on what she has been saying in court, her comments made last Friday when they were there talking about the scope of evidence and what Trump can see and what his attorneys can see and who else can see it, that she is pushing really aggressively and that she is making comments about whether or not he could taint a jury pool, whether that could move up. So with this one, they do have confidence they'll be able to, that this is not going to actually happen in March of 2024. That one, they do have concerns that it could actually potentially happen next year in the election season.
Alyssa, Trump's team is in negotiations with Fulton County authorities over the terms of his surrender. It is possible we'll see a mugshot. No doubt if that happens, his team will use it for fundraising. But do you think Donald Trump would be ultimately, deep down, embarrassed by the existence of a mugshot?
I think deep down he would certainly hate to see a mugshot. I think something that he's never expected would exist of himself, but they're absolutely going to capitalize on it if we end up seeing one. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw a, Trump mugshot NFT and whatever other grifts they can come up with. But listen, the Trump team is worried about this series of events that they may have, where it's from January to March. He could effectively be on two different trials if they can't get this date moved back. And he's benefited tremendously and remarkably from these indictments in the polls and in his fundraising. I think you're going to see that decline in the new year, though. Campaigns are going to be in full swing. You're going to come up on the Iowa caucuses. He may not be able to attend events because of trial dates. You're going to come up on New Hampshire. He may have to be, down in Georgia or dealing with the Department of Justice. I think he's very cognizant that could force him to lose a very critical election window ahead of, actually determining who the nominee is. So he is worried about that.
Caitlin, Trump on Truth Social yesterday wrote, quote, "They never went after those that rigged the election. They only went after those that fought to find the riggers," a word that I'm not particularly familiar with, riggers. Keith Boykin, a Democratic political commentator and former White House aide to Bill Clinton, he took issue with that term. Take a listen.
Oh, and he wants to find the riggers, his word, not mine, who stole the election from him. Rigger, please.
Boykin went on to say Trump's choice of words is not an accident after spending days making racist attacks against Fani Willis, the black woman leading the prosecution against him in Atlanta. What do you make of that?
I mean, it's entirely unsurprising if you've been watching and listening to Donald Trump attack essentially everyone who has criticized him, certainly those who have investigated him. But I think what is different here is that he is pushing the limits of the criminal justice system in the sense of what he is saying online. His attorneys certainly recognize that. I mean, they argue publicly and in court that he has a First Amendment right, that he is running for office, that what he says should not be limited. But they also recognize the reality that these are prosecutors and judges that are either overseeing the case or handling the investigation in and of itself, and that this is not helpful to them, that this is problematic. But Trump is someone who can't necessarily, be told what to do. I mean, his post yesterday about holding the major, or 2 days ago about holding the major press conference at Mar-a-Lago or at Bedminster on Monday, talking about how he's finally going to prove election fraud 3 years later, is something that he did almost entirely on his own. It wasn't something that was this coordinated campaign strategy. And so, I mean, he has access to these Truth Social's accounts. He's the one who posts these posts. And so the question is, does the judge weigh in here in any of these cases? And do they get involved? And does it hurt him potentially, as Judge Chutkan in Washington has warned that it would? Whether or not that happens remains to be seen.
Alyssa, what do you make of the racial accusation Keith Boykin was making there, that the use of the word rigger is not unintentional? President Trump has certainly been accused of racist language before.
Right. With Trump, you don't need to look for a dog whistle. It's a bullhorn when it comes to race. And I do think that's deliberate. We've seen slanderous attacks that he's put out against Fani Willis, alleging things I won't even repeat. So he's not really hiding that he's going to lean into that element. And this is taking place just outside of Atlanta. When you saw the courtroom, it was a lot of black men and women who were serving in that courtroom. The fact that he's introducing race into this prosecution surprises me. It's disgusting. It's textbook Donald Trump, but it comes as no surprise.